All right, everybody, what's going on? I just beat Resident Evil 4 a few days ago, and it is absolutely incredible. Game of the year material. I love it. And so I wanted to give it a few days, and I thought, why don't I rank the five modern Resident Evil games? I'm talking about Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4 remake, along with Resident Evil 7 and 8. And so I wanted to give it a few days to just kind of think about it. And in the process, I replayed Resident Evil 2 again because I love that game, and then I just started over another playthrough of Resident Evil 4 because I love that game so much. And I want to start off by saying that all five of these games, I think, are at worst good. The worst game in this group is at least good, and the best is an all-time great. So before I get into that, do me a favor, hit that like button. Consider subscribing to the channel. We got our new podcast, The Fusion Cast, every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern, so you don't want to miss that. All right, without further ado, let's get started here. We're going to start with Resident Evil 7, I think, is the first one that came out of this group, and Resident Evil 7 is awesome. I played that game 100% start to finish in VR, played a little bit of a second replay in VR, and I even played a little bit on the flat screen, and this game is terrifying in VR. Let me tell you that. I think that elevated it for me. I love the story in this game. The Baker family is crazy. You know, it's scary getting chased around in VR. Some of the downfalls, I think the last third of the game is not my favorite. Yeah, that would be one of the big negatives. There's no real zombies in the game really, but it's got some great bosses like the Baker, the old man, and the old woman are terrifying. Those are great bosses. So I would, if I was going to rank this, I wouldn't put it up because the bottom, that last third really holds it back. I would probably put this in the A category. It's just a step below like game of the generation and all-time greats. If it wasn't for that last third, it'd be up in that S category. So the next up is a remake to one of my favorite games of all time. Resident Evil 2 holds a special place in my heart. I played that when I was a kid, played through both scenarios multiple times, got Hunk. I love it. They did a great job with this remake. I absolutely love it. It's really different from Resident Evil 4, but that's what I love about it. I mean, when I just replayed it again, I'm like going through it, and I'm like, after playing Resident Evil 4, I'm like, damn, there's hardly any ammo in this game to start, and I was like, I was really worried. I'm like, oh shit. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with this. Is gonna be probably in the S tier if I have to go. It's definitely in the S tier. It's one of the best games ever. One of the best games ever for sure. Now, the next one is going to be RE3, and it's not one of my favorites. This is the lowest ranking one on the list. This is going to go in the good category. It's a good game. It's very short. It's more actiony than Resident Evil 2, but it doesn't have some of like Resident Evil 4 gives you a lot of stuff to do while it's just nonstop going, and it doesn't have that. It's got some decent bosses, and where I would compare it to Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 2, Mr. X is amazing in Resident Evil 2, where Nemesis is not as good as Mr. X, and it almost feels like, okay, we've been there, done that, but a less good version of Mr. X. So I'm going to put that in the B category. And now we have Village, which Village is very good too. That's the sequel to Resident Evil 7. And one thing that bothered me about Village is that the developers said they wanted to make it a little less scary to be more approachable for everybody, which I think took away a lot of what made Resident Evil 7 great. Resident Evil 7 was terrifying, and that's what made it great for me, at least, my opinion. So it's going to go a notch down for that. Also, the story gets a little wild, and Ethan gets his arm cut off, and he sews it back on. So the story goes really off the rails for me in there, but I still really enjoyed it, and I would put it in the B category. Now, if we're going to do Resident Evil 4, I think Resident Evil 4 is amazing. It's so much fun to play. Story wise, it's not as good as Resident Evil 2 in my opinion. I think the story is a little weird. You've got the Las Plagas that infects someone's body, and then the sailor can control it. Which, I mean, Resident Evil stories aren't amazing, but there's some that are better than the others. I would put Resident Evil 2 story above Resident Evil 4. So basically, we're going to have to argue here which one of these is the better game. Is it Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 4? And they're both very different games. Like I said, after finishing Resident Evil 4, I go back to RE2 and I'm like, whoa, I don't have a lot of ammo. There's zombies all over here. I don't have a lot of ammo to kill all these zombies at first. You eventually get a lot more ammo and you're more capable to be able to fight. But oh man, there's a lot of going back, forth, go here, get this item, go back and do this, then get this item, go back here and do this. It's almost like a Metroidvania kind of Resident Evil 2 is, whereas Resident Evil 4, it's just boom, 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 nonstop. There's really no downtime in that game. And I waffled on this. I waffled. Originally, I said, well, Resident Evil 2 is my favorite Resident Evil of all time. It's going to stay up there. And after replaying Resident Evil 2, maybe it's because I played it so much, and then starting Resident Evil 4 again for the second time, I did switch it, and I do think I have to put by a hair, I think I'm going to have to put Resident Evil 4 as the number one game in the franchise, and Resident Evil 2 just slightly below it, Resident Evil 2 is way scarier than Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 is not scary. There's a lot of good jump scares in Resident Evil 2, and it's a lot shorter than Resident Evil 4, but you can multiple playthroughs with different characters. It's so hard. I mean, if it were I could probably go back and forth depending on the day, but as of right now, I'm going to have to go with Resident Evil 4 as the best game in the series. So we've got 4, 2 Remake, 7, Village, and Resident Evil 3 pulling it in the rear. But I mean, they're all great games, and I would recommend everybody playing these games. You can't go wrong. Some of the best games of all time, in my opinion. So that is my ranking, and yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. So thanks for watching. Do me a favor once again. Make sure to hit that like button. Consider subscribing to the channel. Don't forget about the Fusion Cast, Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, and I will see you later. Thank you.